My name is Josiah, and I'm going to teach you today how to ace all of your certifications. So, obviously, certifications are very important in the IT field, and the reason that you're here is to learn how to do them much better. Obviously, there are roadblocks to certification exams that many people face, failed attempts. I've definitely had my fair share, and I have recently implemented and utilized this technique to ace pretty much every exam currently that I have certification for. So Associate of ISC2, Security Plus, all the way down to A Plus, CCNA, and all that good stuff. And so I wanted to share this with you as a way to study for exams that I believe is pretty much foolproof and very simple and easy to use. They might be techniques you're already implementing, but if not, happy to elaborate on them. Please comment below if you have any questions about them. Beyond all this, basically what this technique involves is active recall and space repetition. And so I'm sure you've heard the terms before. Let's just review them really quick. So active recall is basically a study technique that implies that passive learning does not work. So what you are going to see within your studies is that watching videos without taking active notes and understanding the material is not going to work. Even watching videos and taking notes verbatim with what people are sharing does not work. You're also going to find that without taking practice tests and without utilizing some form of a memory utilization technique, whether that be flashcards or working on toggle lists or something like that in Notion, basically what you're going to find is that you're not able to recall the information actively, and you're not able to basically limit your forgetting curve. And so again, active recall is pretty simple, but basically what it implies is that you are actively working with the information. So what does that mean? Basically what it means is that by watching a video, you have two options. You can take the video and you can share exactly what they're saying, or you can try and internalize it by giving yourself examples, by giving yourself tools, by giving yourself your own way of thinking about it. There are various techniques, such as the Feynman technique, which is basically that you are sharing with a 3 to 5 year old, a maybe a high school student, and then a expert in the field, and you're sharing all the information that you have and trying to explain that to different individuals. And so you can take that and learn from them. And let me just show you a really quick example of what I mean by that. All right, so let's take a real world example at this. I have downloaded the just example practice questions that CompTIA provides online. You can just go ahead and search that, and they give you 10 questions or so for whatever test you want, just to kind of get a feel for what it's actually going to look like on the test. So we can start with question 2. Question 1 is very simple, so I wanted to take question 2 as an example. And I'm going to basically outline exactly how you want to also think about the test, because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to accomplish. You're not trying to be a cell phone repair person. You're not trying to be the world's greatest A plus engineer. You're not trying to, be a support ops engineer. Yes, that's an aspect of what you're learning. And yes, you want to be familiar with all the terms, but you learn that in real world experience. You don't learn that from a test typically. And so using this is basically a certificate to get in the door, right? And so if you want to actually learn systems administration, support ops, or anything else, you're going to perform that in a real world scenario. For this, we're just taking a test. And so we always have to keep that at the forefront. We have to think about how we're taking the test, what information is useful, and how they're asking questions. One of the biggest hangups for me on the A plus was how they ask questions, because it's not always clear as to how difficult it should be or other things like that. And had I familiarized myself with the material a little bit more, taken more practice exams, it would have been a lot better. So I digress there. Basically, let's take question 2. A user brings in a smartphone for repair. The device is unable to send and receive calls or connect to Wi-Fi. All apps on the device are working unless they require connectivity. Which of the following is most likely causing the problem? Let me go through the answers of airplane mode, tethering, disabled hotspot, or VPN. So right off the bat, we notice a few things, right? So a user brings in a smartphone for repair. What is the most, likely cause of the problem? What is most likely causing the problem, right? So we're not being asked, any one of these might actually cause the issue, but one of these is the best answer. So already, we can look at VPN and we can think, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Because it can't connect to Wi-Fi and all apps are working unless they require connectivity. But that's not the answer, because most likely it's airplane mode. And so that's the first thing. The other thing we want to do is understand, utilizing active recall, why it's airplane mode, right? So you don't just memorize answers, you don't just memorize what's going on the page, but you really want to understand and basically train your brain to explain why something is every single time. By doing this, you're strengthening that connection in your brain. You're strengthening that memory and memorization tool to remember, okay, when I see airplane mode, these are the aspects of airplane mode that are really, really important. With a great, test-taking tool, such as, Professor Messer has some practice tests. Obviously, CompTIA has some very good practice tests as well. There should be explanations as to why something's correct and why something is wrong. And so basically we can reconfigure our framework constantly to the right answer. And so what we're trying to do is basically align ourselves with the way that CompTIA asks questions. And then we're basically trying to align ourselves with what every single one of these definitions means within the sphere of CompTIA, right? So airplane mode might mean something different to me than CompTIA. And what I mean by that is, airplane mode is just a switch on my iPhone that I use to, basically turn off all cell connection and internet. And that's primarily right before I hop on a plane. So for this says nothing about a plane. This says nothing about any of that. And so maybe CompTIA sees it as more of a troubleshooting thing, or more of a, various contexts and different context clues could give us more a more clear picture as to what they mean by airplane mode. I hope that makes sense. Basically, you're trying to understand the way that they're asking questions, why they're asking it that way, and then what each term means. And by doing that, you're able to much more successfully be prepared for the exam. And so what I would do then is utilize the Feynman technique, the 3 to 5 year old, the high school student, and then a an expert in the field. So, we could start there. We could say, what is airplane mode? Well, airplane mode is a button you push on your phone, right? So that's 3 to 5 year old. A high school student, you might say, airplane mode is basically a toggle switch that takes off your internet connectivity, and it takes off your ability to receive calls. Now, with airplane mode on, you still have access to all of the applications, downloaded content and everything else. It just breaks the signal to, your internet or your ability to send and receive calls. And then for an expert, you could dive in even deeper and say, airplane mode is a switch that works on the back end of your phone system, and it, kills the connection to Wi-Fi and sending or receive calls with the intention of blocking cell phone reception to your device and outgoing cell phone reception, so that it's not able to be deciphered by any other radio transmitters in the area, right? So typically, you turn it off, obviously, right before you board a flight or right before you take off. And the reason you do this is because there are other transmitters and other cell receptors in the area that might get interference from your cell connection. And so by explaining that and over explaining it, you're much more prepared for this question, right? So now you know why it's airplane mode, why it's not tethering, and you can do the exact same thing for tethering, right? And the exact same thing for disabled hotspot and VPN. You could say, what is a VPN? Well, it encrypts, your transmission from your phone to, the endpoint. And when you think about it like that, and you think about the way that CompTIA is asking the question and thinking through the question, you're much more prepared. And the reason that you're much more prepared is this doesn't mention anything about encryption, right? This doesn't mention anything about, setting up a connection from, endpoint to endpoint. And so, or client to host or whatever. And that would be a red flag, right? So any one of these could cause this issue, but the right answer is airplane mode, and we can verify that through this. So, this is just an answer key. Obviously, you want to get a really, really solid practice test. And so the ones that I use to, utilize the most successful ones that I've seen, at least, and the most lifelike, honestly, were not the CompTIA exams. This is not sponsored by Professor Messer at all, but I was able to pass with just the notes and exam combos for all A+, Sec+, and Network Plus. And so really all you need is this comprehensive notes and practice exam. So you're going to take those notes, you're going to convert them into a way to remember them constantly. So whether that's flashcards or other, materials, obviously you want to do this legally. Don't share it with anybody. You've purchased them, so you can kind of do with them as you will, or in a toggle way, whatever is easiest for you. The point is not to make really great flashcards. The point is to make pretty decent flashcards and start memorizing. And the reason that you want to start memorizing is you have this thing called a forgetting curve, which is basically that for the time that something takes, you are, basically creating less memory on that thing. But what you can do is remind yourself consistently of that, and that forgetting curve gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So the idea here is, hey, if I review a flashcard today, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, that forgetting curve is going to get longer and longer. And so if I only reviewed it once every week, then that forgetting curve, I might forget it every 3 days or 4 days, and it might be completely useless. But if I keep reminding myself of these, various tools or these concepts, then that forgetting curve is going to get longer and longer. And so if I remind myself every day for, let's say 6 weeks, and then I take the test, you are going to remember the things, so much easier. And so if I take all of these terms and have a really, really solid understanding of each one, so airplane mode, tethering, disabled hotspot, VPN, those are all flashcards. What's an airplane? What is airplane mode tethering? I'm going to explain each one, and that forgetting curve is going to skyrocket up. And that is what you're trying to do when you take an exam. You're taking the questions from this, and you're memorizing these terms and concepts, and then you're going to basically utilize that to take the test in a really, really solid way. So I hope that makes sense. I just wanted to share this a little bit, so it was really, really useful for me, pretty much a game changer. I was able to pass the Network Plus in a couple of weeks utilizing these techniques. I was familiar with a lot of the concepts and terms just from on-the-job training and other things like that. And so it's not that I wasn't familiar at all with them. I'm not going from zero to hero. I'm very much, but when we're talking about taking a test, when we're talking about, utilizing this framework, it skyrocketed my ability to be able to do this. And so I just wanted to share it as a useful tool. A few just tips or tricks is really, really start with solid resources. So you want a really good practice test, really good flashcards, or at least a baseline for really good flashcards that you can just make some okay flashcards out of. And then always just remember, you're taking a test. You're not trying to be a master of the subject. And so, basically you're trying to figure out the best way to take this exam and pass it, right? You're not trying to be an expert in your field. And when you utilize active recall and spaced repetition, you'll be much, much, much more set up to be able to accomplish this in a really solid way. Don't forget to utilize CompTIA's resources as well. So they have a free guide on on the various topics that are available. So a really, really solid thing to do is just break down each topic and explain it. Feynman technique that, and just say, hey, this is exactly what this is. This is exactly what this is, and be able to break each part down. Because if you're consistently getting high scores on your exams and you're able to really understand each component, that it's asking, whether it's airplane mode, VPN, tethering, whatever it may be, then you're ready to take the exam. And you should be ready, because that's the way that the exam operates. And so I hope that makes sense. And again, please comment if you have any questions. I hope to create some more resources here in the description and be able to help you along the way. So thanks so much. And I will be continuing to make videos on this concept and others so that everybody can utilize this in a really, really positive way. Take care.